Morning, everyone. So we're going to do a quick video just talking about one unit entry in the Warriors book, and that is the Marauding Giant. This is not going to be a fill out the last 400 points in my list video, but it's an entry that I've only taken once or twice, and I think in semi anticipation for a potential Beldreg Elder nerf or something in the book changing. I've always been interested in taking giants. And usually what it comes down to is, oh, I can get something else that's better, quote unquote, um, for the points, or why would you take giants when you can take elders, even though, they're 100, 200 points less. And so I want to give them a fair shot to kind of talk about them real quick and just go through the different options and what I think and maybe any cool things or what I like. So I do like giants in general. I know that some people don't like some of them. The ogre giants are considered very, very good. I think the orc giants are pretty good, though they're kind of priced similarly to the Great Green Idols, which I always thought the Great Green Idols were just better. But honestly, like small bases, um, quick single models that can, they're almost like chaff because of how cheap some of them are. It probably has way more uses than I even give credit for without putting it on the table. And obviously, it comes down to what your army is doing as well. It's not just you can't look at all giants in a vacuum because what's built around it really matters as well. And that'll be some discussion here. So the Marauding Giant, like all giants, 7, 14, 8, 50 by 75 millimeter base. The rule it gets from Warriors is the Battle Fever, which is actually really nice because it basically gets reroll panic and break checks on its own, which is really nice for a single model that's like on the flanks. If you think of it as compared to like a elder, now elders don't panic from other things, but as far as like uh, a steadfast check, getting flanked by maybe a flyer or something like that, like you're on a rerollable 8 instead of a 9 unrerollable. So it's actually, I think there's no situation where the elder is better from taking a break check perspective as far as like the math of -1, reroll 7 versus 8, stuff like that. That being said, so that's pretty nice. That's just a generally nice rule to have the rerolls on the flanks, and just period. 7 HP, pretty nice. Obviously, res 5 is low for this particular army. 5 attacks, offensive 3, not the greatest offense. We all know what giants do, and so I think that's not in dispute, and that's not really part of the question here. So the three options. So there is a chosen giant option, and Thomas will be remiss if I don't, or whatever the phrase is. Thomas will not be happy if I don't talk about it a little bit. I'm not going to bring it up because I don't have the giant supplement open. It is probably the best option. I think he becomes a champion and he gets armor or something and he can challenge. And it's really nice. But since it's not a legal one for most events, I tend not to think about it, though it is a very good option from a monster perspective. So go look at that one if you want to play with the book giants. As far as the official giants, these are the ones we got. We have the Giant Club, which is a oldie but everybody gets it. +1 strength, +1 armor pen, 30 points. Hard to go wrong with that. Monster's familiar, so it becomes an apprentice, and you get to select Glory of Gold, Breath of Corruption, Hellfire. So this is an interesting one, and we will have to go and talk about the army I play a lot because despite it not being some big debate about the last 400 points, it really is about the context of the army that I play and why would I consider even taking a giant. And so I think broadly speaking, it's just a fast single model. That's what I like to play. That's what I play. It's kind of nice that it's in a kind of a point range of 300, which you don't really have a lot of. I mean, we have like, it's weird. We have like chariots for 230. We have like elders and stuff for closer to 400, 500. And so this like super fast 300 point monster is just kind of a different beast as far as what we have goes, right? Like I think of it as potentially partial chaff, right? I do really like active chaff. I've talked about that before. Active pieces, I'd like my mages to fight because I want to be able to do something with them, even if they're not casting. And I think 14 inches, sure, it's not the ideal. It's a 14-inch move single model. So, like, as far as chaff ranges go, like, that's pretty good. Like, you don't like, yes, normal fast cav move faster. It's not a huge base, so that's something that it really has an advantage of. Yes, dogs are faster when they do their extra thing to 22. I do think you can get away with just one chaff piece like flares if you take a giant, because you always have the option to kind of put them out there and just say, hey, deal with it. This is kind of the other thing I've spoken about, which I really like a piece that somebody has to deal with it, but you don't really care if it dies, right? So if you think about it, and maybe people have done this to you, right? If somebody puts, I don't know, I think Yetis are a great example of this because I do kind of like Yetis, and I've talked about it before. When you chaff somebody with Yetis, there's a good chance you're either going to hold, you're not going to kill them all and you have to pursue, or you have to commit something substantial to kill it, right? If somebody puts 10 dogs, 8 dogs in front of you, you could charge that with anything. You could hit it with 10 goblins and the dogs are probably going to break, right? But there's a lot of units that if you put a giant in front of it, like, they have to commit something to kill it, and it's not even potentially that likely that they kill it. And they might break it, they might do some damage before it dies, it might snipe a character before it dies. Like, there's a lot of considerations when, when you like, as far as chaff goes, when you think of it as, oh, I'm going to chaff with this monster, it's kind of like, oh no, he has to deal with it, and as long as you have enough threats to counter whatever they're doing, it kind of makes up his value. Like, yes, you're paying 260, maybe we'll say 300 with one of the options. You're paying 300 for this chaff piece when maybe the flares are 155 with the champ, but it does other things. And so maybe as far as like true chaff goes, it's not true chaff, but if you ever need it, it's not like it's one of your main pieces. It's kind of like why the ogre list with like the hunters and the 3 giants, and like every unit was like aggressively, you could throw anything out there and then people would have to deal with it. So that's kind of why I like the giant body. It's still tough enough to get through. Another kind of piece before we go through the other options specific to warriors would be, and I kind of learned this because I ran the Entropic Lord on a chariot, and people kind of say the same thing when I have my chariot mage. They talk about, hey, aren't you scared of cannons? Aren't you scared of this? And I'm like, I have 2 elders and a harem that can win you the game if you play them right. They only have 1 cannon. They can't shoot everything. And so, think of it this way. If you're shooting the giant, which has some of the cheapest wounds per HP of all the monsters in my army, you're not shooting the giant with a cannon because you can't, because I have elders and heralds and chariot guys out there that are worth more and probably better to shoot. Now, these kind of bring on targets of light arm shooting, pyro magic, kind of opens you up to be a little bit worse versus pyro. But I think you can handle that in other ways, and we'll talk about that when it comes to the options. But it's kind of like, yes, if you're an army of movement 3 dwarves and there's only 1 giant on the board, you took a giant from the supplement, you're probably going to get your giant shot by everything because it's the obvious target. But if your targets are all, chariot mages, chariot heroes, heralds, and stuff, then he kind of falls down the list of, hey, I need to shoot that. That being said, so that's kind of why I like the idea, but I at least want to give it a try, especially if things get nerfed, opening up different things, different monsters. He's similar to Gus in that sense. He's cheaper than Gus by about 100 points. He's a little bit more reliable as chaff. Gus is kind of a nuisance because random mover rules can be complex and you can take advantage of them. And obviously the auto hits, he doesn't do anything. You can't one-shot Gus and not take hits back. So this isn't to replace Gus, but the fact is, for the points of, you can fit 2 elders and 2 giants into the monster points currently. So, you can't fit elder, Gus, giant. So it kind of is a little bit of give and take there where you kind of use your monster points better. Anyway, and he's, it's just a different piece. It's just a totally different piece. So we know kind of why we want to take one and why we want to try one. So Giant Club, take it or leave it. I think people tend to think you need a Giant Club, but when you don't have a Giant Club, Giant Club is 290. You're paying 10% more. That's 30 points. for +1 strength. And yes, it matters. There are matchups where, like, if you're against knights or something, you really want to have that AP3 and whatnot. But as far as like just an annoying piece for 260, a naked giant's actually pretty freaking good if you kind of think about it. There was a game I played. If you look at my other video, and I'll just quickly touch on it, where I cornered because I needed a tie to win the tournament, whatever. And it was breakthrough, and it was undead vampires. You can see the picture, and I'm deployed on the other side of the board. And I look back at that picture, and I'm like, man, if I would have just had one piece, and I could have did it with an elder, I actually could have did it. If I just had a giant, let's just say a giant sitting over there, 260, he can run around ghouls, he can beat a scoring unit that's trying to get across the board. If the enemy doesn't have a big enough piece to commit to it, or an overcommit to it, right? Because sometimes the enemy might not have anything that can beat the giant that's kind of in its price range. It could be, oh, I have rank and file units, let's just say can't beat him. Or I have a huge monster like a Shrieking Horror that can go kill him. But the problem is, the Shrieking Horror, if it goes and kills the giant, I'm just going to run away. I'm going to run around. I'm going to distract. It's a distraction piece, right? If it's Spoils of War, and you're going to get one of the markers on the side with a warrior unit or some barb unit, having a giant supported, even cheap, can kind of turn the tide for you without investing like an elder into it. Like it kind of changes that perspective, those matchups. And if they don't put anything over there, you just walk them 14 inches the other way and say, okay, I just have another single model running around. So that's kind of why I like that. And then, when you compare them to chariots or something, being able to move 14 in these situations, you can get out of bad situations faster, or you can reposition a lot better, or go chaff. So even though he might not be as tanky, or he maybe even hit as hard, those are some of the options why you might take it. So Monstrous Familiar. So why does this one seem pretty interesting? So you're paying 45 points for a spell, essentially. And so you can think of that as like an heirloom or something. And obviously it's on a giant, which has its downside and good side. Good part, Glory of Gold. If he takes it, you're probably better ranged. You're probably closer to being in range of things because, your chariot, you can put him where you want. Sometimes a chariot mage isn't within 18. Breath of Corruption is a great spell. Really great spell. It's one I take a lot on my Herald. I didn't actually take Fly last tournament, but I wish I had the spell. And sometimes it lets you take Breath of Corruption without having to take the Herald, take Fly. So there are matchups where, I don't want Fly, but I really want the spell, and all of a sudden you have it on your giant. And Hellfire. So you might think Glory of Gold. Hey, I take that almost every game. I think I take it 99% of games. I think I didn't take it versus ID because it's ID. But most games you take Glory of Gold. So you're saying, well, that's kind of redundant. And what if I let's take, for example, the Dark Elf matchup, where I take all three of these spells all the time. I take it on my Herald, I take it on my Breath Corruption, Hellfire, and Herald, I take Glory of Gold on my Mage. Well, what this kind of does is gives you the option. You can't think of it as he just gets these three spells. Because you always want Glory of Gold, it allows your Mage to take another spell. There's a lot of times where I'm sitting there and I'm like, he does have a decent lash target, but I need Glory of Gold and armor for if we fight. I can't take lash. You can almost think of it as getting lash, because now your giant gets the Glory of Gold part and your mage can take lash. Now it's not perfect because the giant can die. It maybe becomes a point of you don't want to sacrifice him as much and whatnot, but you just kind of live with that. But it is an option. It is something cool. He can take Hellfire and he can run around Hellfire people. He can kind of get in more of a position to be maybe a little bit riskier with the Hellfire than maybe your Herald. Or a big thing that happens is sometimes I want to take Comet. This one happened a lot. I want to take Comet for some reason, but I also want to take Hellfire, and I also want to take, we'll say, Smite and Pentagram. It happened twice. And one time I took Hellfire on my Chariot Mage, and one time I just didn't take Comet, because I was like, I'm not going to have the spells to support it, because if you don't have the other big spell, like sometimes you need a big Hellfire and a Comet to make sure you can actually get one of them off. The point being is, he could take Hellfire, and it frees up my Herald to take Comet, or the whole Breath thing. So I actually think having that spell, it's not just picking between these three spells, which are very good spells. It opens up Spike and Lash and Comet more for your Herald and your other mage to kind of, so you're actually getting more than just that because you're already taking these spells anyway a lot of the time. Tribal War Spear. This is a very interesting one because it's like the club but better, right? The only thing it does worse than the club is it's -1 AP, but you gain multiple wounds versus Towering Presence for 10 points, which seems better to me in general for a giant because that, we have a lot of strength 6 in the army. We have elders, we have, characters, we have Herald can do it, we have the Great Weapon Elder. So I don't think that that's like a necessary problem. But being just multi wounds versus Towering Presence, the fact that he can stand in front of other monsters, now he becomes a different kind of threat because if I chaff an Elder, I don't know the math on it, but it becomes a lot riskier for the Elder because now all of a sudden I'm doing D3 wounds to him. And yes, it saves a little better because he gets a 5-up, but it just becomes a threatening like to other monsters to taking charges from Towering Presence, anything that's big, even a Scourge. I mean, a Scourge probably going to one round your guy, but there's a chance that no, he probably won't one round you. He doesn't have enough attacks. He might needing 2s and 2s or something. But if the Scourge does 6 wounds to you, and you get to go first the next round, and you have a million attacks that do D3 wounds, hey, maybe you pop one through and do D3 wounds to him. It's not impossible. It's kind of scary a little bit. So there's definitely, I like the multi-wound one. Also, it gives you the option to join units. And so you can take like 15-man barbs and core. And some things that's nice about that would be, other than just making the barbs a little better, beefing 15-man barbs up with a giant, you get stomps, you get more attacks. You still get some ranks from the barbs. Now they can just slaughter the barbs if it's like a fighty enough unit, and you just got to kind of live with that. But it's actually more for the protection of the giant, right? So pyromancy, you can only put one hit on the giant, and so now they're casting pyroclastic flow at barbs. And to be honest, you probably don't give that much of a shit about it as the warrior player because they could do it anyway. But now your giant can only take one hit from it. Shooting, like if Sea Guards shoot at you, they can only put one hit on the giant unless they get 20-some hits. The other big one would be if a cannon shoots at you, you do not get +1 to hit because the whole unit isn't gigantic. You get cover, so you do line of sight from the size of the giant, but you do cover from the majority of the unit. So you would still get hard cover and runes and stuff like that for having a giant in barb. So if you're facing like bolt throwers, you might just be able to start the game with hard cover on your giant. Now, it kind of goes against that whole thing of, you have elders and stuff, they're not going to shoot your giants anyway. But when it comes to like strength 3 shooting or strength 4, like crossbows and stuff that really don't want to shoot your elders because they wound on 6s, it kind of is nice for a stat, and it kind of just a way to beef up your scoring if needed. Or you just start in them. It doesn't take up any more board space. Your width becomes very small because your giants can start in your barbs and then just run out if they need to. So I think the Warspear giants are actually pretty cool. I think the wizard one is also pretty cool. I think it actually has some nice plays you can make with the wizard giant. Just depends on if you need what you have and what you need. But yeah, just having a fast single model to kind of be annoying while still having your strong other single models, and you really don't give a shit. If a giant for 260 dies, you're kind of sitting there like, all right. I mean, if you kind of compare it to a Chimera's move 20, which is way faster, give it that. It doesn't have a monstrous rank. It doesn't stomp. It doesn't have reroll, breaks, and leadership checks. It has 5 strength 5. This guy, for 260 has 5 strength 5 base, and then he gets more. He has 7 wounds. Chimera has a 4+ save. I mean, there's a lot of like positive things to looking at a giant versus Chimera. Now Chimera doesn't take monster points, so it's different. It's not really fair. 60 points different. I mean, there's a lot of. It's not a clean comparison by any means. This causes terror. Just charging and causing random terror checks. It can flee. I don't know. I might try it in my next list. I'm gonna try giants at some point. I want to try them. But this was just a quick giant video, and I actually have to go. So thanks for listening.